Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes, the podcast with hot takes on food media.
We interview popular chefs and food personalities, sample all kinds of food media, and try cooking challenges in our own kitchens.
Let's dig in. Hey, it's Justine.
And it's me, Meg.
Welcome back to another episode of Pod Appétit, where we are cooking themed recipes every month and chat about the latest food media we've been consuming. So this is our April wrap-up. I know that it is May right now.
When you're listening to this.
Yes. But we still need to wrap up April. I know it's been an exciting month for us with our interview with Anna Hezel. Mm-hmm. Check that out if you haven't already. But like I said, let's get into it. So this month's themes were National BLT Sandwich Month, National Garlic Month, Passover on April 5th, Easter on April 9th, National Grilled Cheese Sandwich Day on April 12th, and Eid al-Fitr on April 21st. Now, I'm going to kick us off by talking about something I made for Passover.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! So I made a vegan cast iron potato kugel with my friend Dan. Like I mentioned previously, we were making it together. I consulted with him and we both agreed on the recipe, and throughout, mostly he noted one major change which would make it different from a traditional kugel, but I'll get into that.
Okay.
So to make this recipe, you have 3 pounds of russet potatoes and a large yellow onion, and you peel and shape them to fit through your food processor that's fixed with the blade with a lot of small holes to make shoestrings. So word of warning, when that onion goes in, there will be tears. It was amazing. We were both like chopping the onion. We're like, yeah, I haven't cried. Yeah, I'm so tough. As soon as it goes in the thing, we're both like, ah!
And then you don't need to add extra salt. You just cry into the food processor.
Yes. So you mix all that processed potato and onion with some potato starch and salt and pepper. So Dan said at this point, normally you would squeeze everything through a cheesecloth and get rid of all that moisture and then use eggs as a binder. But retaining that moisture, that natural potato starch really did work effectively as a binder. He was like, oh, this worked. This looks like everything's great, just like there were eggs in here. So you take all that, you put that in a preheated cast iron pan with olive oil so you get a crispy bottom. And then you drizzle more olive oil on top and stick that in the oven for an hour or till golden crispy perfection. I will say this is the best thing I made all month. I'm already starting out with the victory. It was like giant hash brown deliciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dan, Ravi, and I ate 75% of it like right there and then, with everyone having like seconds and thirds. Like we could not stop.
It looks tasty. It's like you said, a giant crispy hash brown. What's not to love?
Oh yeah. Going into it, I thought the salt would be not enough. Like even when we were putting it there, I'm like, it's not enough salt. But like when we ate it, it was actually perfect amount of salt quantity. We didn't have to add any more.
It was the tears, like I said.
Yeah. It was the extra salty tears.
It looks like you do also add extra potato starch according to the recipe.
Yes. So the potato starch, just like a little bit of it. It feels like, with how much sort of liquid was in there, and we were using like a slotted spoon to put all of the stuff in a bowl, so we weren't trying to dump right into liquid. We were trying to conserve, like, we weren't squeezing it, but we were trying to make sure there wasn't like extra liquid in there.
I was gonna say part of squeezing the potatoes is to get that crispy final result, because if your potatoes are too wet, they won't crisp up like how you want them to.
It was a Passover miracle. No, it was great. I definitely recommend, and I should probably make it again sometime soon. It's just, it's a bit of a pain to, peel a bunch of potatoes. But once you get through that, it's an easy peasy process of it just going into the pan, into the oven.
Yeah, it looks great. Love potatoes.
Cannot say no to a po-tay-toe. All right, Meg, what's on your plate?
Okay, moving over to another religious holiday, we both made some Easter recipes.
Mm-hmm.
I made hot cross buns for Easter. This is a pretty traditional Easter recipe. I love eating hot cross buns. I've never made them myself, so I thought that this would be a fun thing to make. The recipe I chose was by Saffitz, so the recipe is on Bon Appetit's website. It's your basic yeasted enriched dough. It also includes lemon zest, orange zest, cinnamon, cardamom, and dried fruits of your choice. I used raisins and apricots. One reason I chose apricots is that you finish off the buns with an apricot jam glaze. So I thought that that would go nicely together. These are pretty good. The bread itself was not too sweet. I expected it to be sweeter, but it's a relatively subtle sweetness. You do make the crosses on top with a powdered sugar icing, so you get a little bit more sweetness from that, but not a whole lot. I would say it's kind of reminiscent of a cinnamon roll, a very light on raisins, light on cinnamon, light on icing cinnamon roll.
But, a bad cinnamon roll.
I would say I'm not sure if I would make this particular recipe again. I wish that I had researched my hot cross bun recipes a little bit more before choosing this one, because I was really going for that iconic hot cross look. And what I didn't realize is that the most traditional way to do a hot cross bun is not to put sugar icing on the top after it's cooled, but to actually make a flour and water paste that you pipe onto the buns that then gets baked into the buns. So it's a totally different process. With the flour and water paste, the cross, like I said, gets baked in, so it's a little bit more defined, I guess I would say. And that's what I imagine when I think of a hot cross bun. So I wish I had looked a little bit more thoroughly through possible recipes. Actually, after making this one, I did more research, and I hate to say it, but the Paul Hollywood recipe looks pretty good. So maybe I will try to make that one. Also,
who are you?
I know.
You're like, this Claire Saffitz recipe sucks, and Paul Hollywood is great.
It's opposite day. Also, I feel like the dough could have risen better. That's on me, though. I've noticed every time I've made a yeasted dough that has rested in the fridge overnight, on the second proving, it never rises quite as much as I want to. And so I think maybe my fridge runs a little cold, and then when it's time for that second proof, the dough is starting out very cold, so that it never maybe quite gets warm enough to get as risen as I would like it to be. It needs to really, rise like Jesus for Easter
I was just
buns.
about to say, he is not risen.
No, my Easter buns had not risen. So I think the next time I make a yeasted dough, I will try my best to do all of the proofing on the same day that it's baked instead of keeping it in the fridge overnight. And we'll see how that goes. One last thing about this recipe is that there is an Instagram account I've been following recently called the Bucket List Bake Club. It's a really fun Instagram account. I feel like we're kindred spirits because what the Bucket List Bake Club does is that they have a monthly cooking challenge. So every month they say, hey, everyone, make fill in the blank. And then everyone submits their photos of the recipes they've made. It's amateurs and pros alike. So you see a bunch of really interesting takes on the same recipe. And this month was hot cross buns.
Hey!
So I feel like that was a happy coincidence because I was considering making their challenge of the month anyway. So I felt like that aligned nicely, two birds with one stone.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of why we're doing this podcast this way is to just, have a little bit of our own bucket list stuff. And it's surprising to me that you've never made, hot cross buns. And you're like, well, here we are.
Yep.
Tis the season. I don't know how many sacrilegious things I'm going to keep saying in this podcast. If you're still listening, just wait. There's more coming.
Yeah, we've got more Easter to talk about. So you'll never know what will come out of our mouths.
All right. Continuing on my Easter brunch journey, I made a vegan frittata from Make It Dairy Free. I do love a fancy breakfast, air quotes fancy breakfast, that uses whatever you've got in the fridge. Fancy to me is something other than like oatmeal and cereal.
Sure.
This is a tofu frittata, and you make the tofu element first in a blender, which is basically tofu, milk, cornstarch, nutritional yeast, and seasonings. Lots of varied seasonings. Then you saute whatever mix-ins you have in your cast iron pan. I had asparagus, spinach, and green onions. Once that food is heated up and the greens have wilted, you turn off the stove, fold in your tofu mixture right in the pan, and then put that pan in the oven for 40 minutes. And as you can tell, I started using my cast iron pan.
Yes, very
like
cast iron pan heavy episode.
Yes. Unfortunately, this is when my boyfriend got COVID and lost his sense of taste, so only I know that it was very yummy.
Or you gaslit him and you said, oh, it's so delicious. If only you could taste it.
You know, nothing is more annoying than, you know, if you, like me, as someone who cooks a lot, and your partner, you seek the validation of, like, it's good, right? And they have lost their sense of taste.
Yeah, that'd be rough.
I knew it was yummy. It was good. It was so good. It was good. And it was easy, pretty basic. Would make again.
Do you add anything to make it eggy? You've used that sort of, what was it, sulfur salt before? Does it have
Black
any of
salt.
that? Yeah.
No, it doesn't have any of that. Definitely you could add it. But yeah, I feel like I have also made an egg frittata this year, and I feel like I could do either, but they're just two different animals for me, you know? I'm not going to attempt to make this taste like an egg, you know?
Sure. But you had even more stuff on your Easter menu.
Yes. Also, I made a vegan carrot ginger soup, also from Make It Dairy Free. Like I said, this is around the time the COVID in the house happened, so I was like, healthy soup. Good soup to make healthy.
Gotta have soup when you're sick.
Yeah. Again, it's another basic yet very yummy recipe. I also love putting a heaping table. If there's like this calls for a tablespoon of ginger, I'm like, a heaping tablespoon, did you say? Because I'm like, I want to taste it. I want to taste the ginger. There's onions, garlic, carrots, ginger, lemon juice, and veggie stock, salt and pep. Very easy. I will note that I had rainbow carrots because they were the biggest and most beautiful at Trader Joe's, so I was worried my soup wasn't going to come out orange. So, like, I strategically used the carrots out of the bag in this order: orange, then yellow, then white, and then finally purple carrot.
It looks pretty orange.
Yeah, it still came out orange, but man, I was worried it was going to be purple something. Like,
so are you considering this Easter because carrots and the Easter bunny and all that?
yes, 100%.
Okay.
Carrots are Easter because Easter Bunny eats carrots.
Perfect. I'm there with you. I followed your train of thought. Moving on from Easter, as Justine mentioned at the top of the episode, it is also National Garlic Month. I decided to make Toum. I just like to say Toum. Add a few extra vowels in there. This is basically a garlic mayonnaise, I think is the best way to describe it. I've heard it called a garlic sauce as well, but it's not a very saucy consistency. It's a very mayo-y consistency. The Toum recipe that I used was from Andy Baraghani's cookbook, The Cook You Want to Be. Yay. Thank you, Justine, for sending me a signed copy. Thank you so much. Also, flashback, doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo. You may remember Andy making Toum back in the Bon Appetit days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you rewind to our episode, Bon Appetit Recap, Don't Hurt the Herbs, that was when we first talked about this. Blast to the past.
Toum has also come up, I think, in Sola and Ham's show. I think they made it once.
Rings a bell.
Yeah.
It is a Lebanese dish. It was actually pretty simple to make, not very many ingredients. You use about 4 to 6 garlic cloves. I used 6 because I love garlic.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Egg whites, lemon juice, and a neutral oil. So the key to this recipe is making sure the oil emulsifies with everything else. So basically, you throw everything except for the oil into a blender or food processor. You keep that going, and you gradually, slowly stream the oil into it. Takes about 5 minutes. So you just kind of have to have a steady, slow pour and wait until it achieves this emulsified mayo consistency. It was good. It, like I said and keep saying, very reminiscent of mayonnaise, but like super garlicky mayonnaise. I had it with some chickpeas and some pita and some cucumbers. Yeah, I liked it. It was really good.
I love your picture. It looks like you just like took yourself on a little picnic.
Yes. Little snacky sized portions of everything.
Yeah.
It was a good little lunch. I don't know if I would make it again, only because my husband was not as big of a fan. Speaking of looking for validation from our partners for the food we eat. But that's only because he's not a fan of mayo in large quantities, whereas I could eat mayo with a spoon. So I don't know if I go to the trouble of making it just for myself, because it doesn't keep very long either. It only keeps a few days in the fridge. But we'll see. I might make it again.
Oh, I'm so glad that you made that and celebrated National Garlic Month.
Yes. It was a recipe that caught my eye way back when. I think it was 3 years ago when there was the Bon Appetit video. And even back then I thought, oh, that looks good. So I'm glad I finally made it. What do you have up?
I made some things for Eid, which I was very excited to explore this month. Actually, a few of my coworkers celebrated, so I'm very excited to share pics on our work food Slack tomorrow. So first I'm going to talk about one recipe, but the one I'll talk about later, they're both from this website, Nadia's Healthy Kitchen. So this first one up is vegan baklava cups. Now, this recipe wins at being the least best thing I made this month.
It's funny that you say that because I love your food photography. I know you're a great cook. And I saw these and I was like, those don't look very good. I don't know what it was about it. They just look kind of dry.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it. Hold on. I have a whole story about how I almost died. It could have been something like a combination of the recipe description and me using something different, but I will say if substitutions are not viable, put that in the recipe. So these baklava cups have 3 layers. The base cup is made from oat flour, coconut oil, and maple syrup. There's a frangipan layer, which is almond flour, baking powder, flaxseed, maple syrup, coconut oil, and milk. And then there's a pistachio layer on top of that, which is pistachios, maple syrup, cinnamon, cardamom, rose water. Now, you make these in a mini cupcake pan, which is greased. Here are the instructions. Mix all the base ingredients in a bowl, then press into mini cupcake mounds, lightly brushed with oil to make them easier to remove once baked. Now, if you look at the picture on the website, you can see that they are like cup-shaped. So there should be, in my opinion, an ideal height for the base and then how much they should go up the sides. None of that was mentioned. Also, the molds are very small, so they're kind of hard to work with. Plus, the ingredients, yes, a bit dry. That could have been my fault, as the recipe calls for oat flour, but then there's a star next to it, and then at the bottom it says oats blended into a fine flour in a high-speed blender. Now, I already had oat flour, so I didn't need to grind my oats, so I just used that instead. But would this have made a different texture? Maybe.
I feel like if you already had oat flour, that should be fine, I would assume. Okay,
so when I bit into these, the whole thing, I literally almost died because of how dry they were. I could barely swallow it. Like, I had to run and find some water. Like, it had sucked all the moisture from your throat. Like, you could see the cups came out, like, nice and gold on the outside, but, like, the inside, maybe it's raw flour. Who knows?
The real question is, were they as dry as Mary Berry's scones? Maybe. Did they also
Maybe.
cut up your throat like Mary's scones did?
It didn't cut up my throat. It was like quicksand in my throat.
Edible sand.
Even so, Ravi came the next day and I told him about it. And I was just like, cut it in half and take like the smallest bite. And I was like, have a cup of water nearby. And he tried it and he was just like, whoa.
Was he like, are you trying to murder me?
Yeah, basically. So, they're gonna end up in the garbage. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened here. The photos on the website definitely look cup-shaped, as described. And yours look cupcake shaped. I'm not really sure what happened.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I was like, I don't know what happened either.
Well,
Ugh.
they can't all be winners.
Can't all be winners. Ugh. Do you have a winner next?
I do. I'm gonna switch tracks a little bit. This is something I did not make, but it's something I ate. And it's very seasonal, so I did want to mention it. I enjoyed a bunch of Sakura flavored snacks. So Sakura is Japanese for cherry blossom. And April and May are prime cherry blossom season in Japan. It's a big event. The cherry blossoms bloom south to north across the Japanese islands. And a way in which people celebrate is by doing what are called hanami celebrations. Hanami literally means flower viewing. So it's a really fun outdoor activity. It's kind of picnicky. Sometimes there are nighttime flower viewing events with colored lights on the trees. Basically, it's a fun communal thing that you go do with friends and family and your community. And also, if you happen to be in Japan or live in Japan during this time, you'll see a lot of sakura flavored treats, both savory and sweet. So it's not cherry flavored, it's specifically cherry blossom flavored. So like you might imagine, it's floral, it's a delicate, subtle flavor. I wouldn't say it tastes like rose, but if you've had a rose flavored thing, you kind of get the gist.
Yeah.
They often have sakura flavored treats like candies, jellies, mochi, cake, crackers, teas. You'll also find salted and pickled sakura blossoms that can then also be made into teas or cooked into other treats. I received a bunch of treats from a subscription service called Bokksu. It's, one of those treat boxes that you can get on a monthly basis. And this was gifted to me by a friend of the podcast, Diana. Thank you, Diana.
Diana loves her gift boxes.
She sure does. She is a great gift giver. She is co-host of the podcast Happily Ever Aftermath. I encourage everyone to go listen to that. I have a bunch of Sakura treats to still eat, but some of the ones that I have enjoyed so far include something called a chinsuko, which is a shortbread biscuit. It's a sweet biscuit. I had a little Sakura souffle. It was very cute. It was about the size of like a Pringle, but taller, like souffle shaped. But this is something fun about Bokksu is that they're small portions, which I like because then you can sample a bunch. And they usually have 2 of each thing. So if you have a partner or an SO or whatever, it's fun. You can kind of eat them together and be like, oh, try this. I think it's a real cute idea for a subscription box. I also had some Sakura mochi, and I had a sable, I think it's called, the French cookie, the crispy French butter cookie. But this one had ume flavor, and ume is plum blossoms. So plum blossoms are also part of the flower viewing season, but the Sakura blossoms tend to be the most popular.
Nice. I also second getting your partner or significant other a lovely little treat gift like this.
That is the good thing about food presents is that you usually get to have a little bit. All right, going back to Eid.
Yes, the second thing I made for Eid from Nadia's Healthy Kitchen did come out much better.
Good.
It was a rose cardamom pistachio loaf. This recipe is a bit strange, but it does come together in the end. The cake is basically ground oats, ground pistachios, gluten-free flour, baking powder, salt, cardamom, yogurt, and maple syrup. No other liquids.
Mm-hmm.
The frosting is also a bit different. It is pretty wet. You just basically blend cashews, not soaked cashews, just raw cashews, milk, maple syrup, vanilla, rose water, and beetroot powder to color it pink. So you're thinking dry cake, wet frosting. Yes, they come together well. The decoration on top is also chopped pistachios and pomegranate seeds. It is beautifully nutty and floral, and honestly, I think it's up there with the tres leches for me and for like birthday cake ability.
Okay, yeah.
It's pretty.
It looks very pretty. I love the colors. I love the bright pink. I'm glad this one was a success, whereas her baklava cups were not.
Yeah. Also, Ravi has had this bottle of rose water since like I feel like as long as I've known him. And I'm like, we're using this. Use it or lose it, babe.
I use rose water in cocktails often. I always have rose water on hand.
I gotta find more uses, or I'll just keep making this cake, because he really liked it too.
It looks good. The frosting, I was curious to hear about, because it looked a little chunky.
You don't notice it. There are like very fine little crumbs of cashews throughout, but since the whole thing is made with nuts and seeds, you don't notice it.
Maybe she did mean to say soaked cashews and then forgot to put that.
Usually when you are using cashews in a blend, they are soaked overnight. But yeah, it came out good. I was also like, I made it after I made the cup, so I was like, this better work.
It looks very pretty. I'm a sucker for pink and green cakes. It could go right next to a princess cake and totally belong.
Yes, and I think definitely the string between these two, and definitely something recurring that I've seen in a lot of Eid recipes, is the pistachio. The Middle Eastern flavors. I was so happy to explore and learn and then get at least one yummy treat out of it.
Maybe it's a difference of lighting, but her photographs, the cake looks very green, and yours doesn't look quite so much green. Do you have any idea why that might be?
It was kind of greenish. It may just be the photography.
Yeah.
Because even before it baked, it was the mixture was green. So I would say it could be a little bit of the lighting got a little, when your camera does its auto color correct thing. But it definitely wasn't as green as hers.
It looks beautiful. I like it. And I love pistachios. I love rose. It's a great flavor combo.
All right, Meg, last up. What you got?
My last thing, it doesn't fall under any theme whatsoever for the month, but I wanted to mention it because it was a pretty involved recipe. And it kind of goes along with hot cross buns. This is another thing that I have eaten many a time, but never made myself, and it is chilaquiles, which is, I could kind of describe it as sort of it's kind of a casserole in a way. So it's fried up tortillas or tortilla chips if you don't want to fry up the tortillas yourself that have been coated in a sauce, and then you layer it in a baking dish with cheeses. You bake it or sometimes just broil it depending on the recipe, and then you serve it with fried eggs on top and various fresh condiments. The recipe I went with suggested onion, radishes, cilantro, and lime wedges, so that's what I used. I once again went back to Bon Appetit. This is just a recipe by the Bon Appetit test kitchen. It's not attributed to a particular person, but I did watch the video in which Rick Martinez made the chilaquiles. But it was interesting because it was before we started this podcast, so we never talked about it on the podcast. And also, I think you can kind of tell it's in the earlier days because it's not as polished. And even though they link to the recipe I used in the YouTube description, the recipe that Rick makes it's not the same recipe. The recipe I made has a red chili sauce with guajillo peppers and jalapeno and tomatoes and smoked paprika. So it's this very nice, deep, rich red chili sauce, whereas what Rick made was a green chili sauce, tomatillos, scallions, I think poblanos as well, roasted, totally different sauce. He also added shredded chicken. I did not add shredded chicken, but it was still fun to watch the video to see how I was supposed to assemble it. And also Hunzi and Gabby had cameos, so
Aww.
it really brought me back.
You got into your feels.
It sure did. And to be honest, one of the main reasons why I wanted to make a chilaquiles recipe is that I had a bunch of tortillas in the freezer. Mm-hmm. Just like way too many. And I thought to myself, I need to do something with these tortillas. And I did stray from the recipe a little bit. The extra tortillas I had were flour tortillas, whereas you're supposed to use corn tortillas. But I think it still turned out well. The chips were maybe a little bit softer, maybe a little bit crumblier than they would have been with corn tortillas or corn chips. But I thought it tasted great. The sauce was really delicious. If I don't make this whole recipe again, which I probably would, but if I don't, I would at least make this sauce. Very tasty. I would say it's very fresh, even though you do cook it for a while on the stovetop. It still has that very fresh, bright flavor to it. I really enjoyed that. I had fun frying up the tortillas. Frying is always a little bit scary to me, especially when you need several inches of oil like you do for this recipe. I think it called for 3 inches of oil at 365 degrees. So a lot of very hot oil going on there, but I was a little intimidated, but they turned out great. They were very tasty. I'll be more ready to fry tortillas or other things again in the future. It has maybe given me the confidence to finally try churros someday, perhaps.
Ooh, yes.
But yeah, it was really good. I liked it.
If you don't want to follow this recipe, you can just make a fried egg and then throw some salsa on top of that and then eat it with tortilla chips, which is something that I've done in the past.
Deconstructed chilaquiles.
Yes. We talk a lot about chilaquiles at my work because half of my department is Latinx people, so it's a fave.
Yes, I love Mexican food.
That wraps up everything we made in April, and we made so many goodies this month. I know I went maybe a little too extra hard.
Well, before we recorded this podcast, last time we chatted, you're like, I think maybe I'll have 2 recipes, and then you come back with 5.
Whoops.
I think all food.
I'm making it up because next month I'll be traveling a lot, so I think I won't bring as much. But speaking of, as you've all been patiently waiting for, here is what we're going to be celebrating in May. So May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. It's also National Salsa Month. May 5th is Cinco de Mayo. It is also National Enchilada Day. I'm sensing a theme here. May 29th is Memorial Day, which we can celebrate backyard cookout, mains and sides. And also, Meg and I, we're bringing back a game. We're going to do seasonal produce roulette. Basically, if you want to play along to this, there are plenty of lists online. You can just Google May fruits and vegetables, May seasonal produce, and then choose your wheel spin, device. Yes.
I prefer random number generators online. Very easy to use. You do have to make a list, though, and assign numbers, but it's easy.
Yeah. And then basically, if we choose to do that, which I feel like we will because we love chaos like that, whatever fruit or veggie it lands on, we will make a dish or whatever, about that fruit or veggie.
I did just now think of another theme that wasn't in our notes. May 4th, aka Star Wars Day. So if you want to make some blue milk or some of those little blue macarons that Baby Yoda eats, Star Wars themed foods.
Classic Meg.
Always thinking of the nerdy angle.
Time to talk about what content we've been consuming with our eyes. With our eye holes.
Our eye holes.
Our eye holes. So I watched a video from Carla Lalli Music. Speaking of, we have a very BA-centered episode today.
We are always going back to our roots.
This was a video for her recipe tofu with sizzled ginger and greens. I also follow her on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, follow us on Substack.
Yes, please. Podappetit.substack.com.
Yes, perfect plug right there. So basically, I saw this and the corresponding article she posted where she wrote about the struggles of recipe development and how this recipe gave her a hard time. And then also in the video, she's also talking about that point too. She's kind of a more frustrated Carla than usual around this. So I just feel like maybe Carla's recipes are a little too complicated for me.
Oh, really?
If I did this, I would definitely do like her spinets, where she like, you can substitute it, because everything in this basic recipe here would not be in my local grocery store. I think I would have to like travel to specifically the Asian grocery store, which I'm fine to do, but I gotta make a plan for that. Also, I feel like I'm betraying mom here. So when Carla does end up making vegetarian recipes, I'm not usually interested in them.
Yeah. I will say, of the many Bon Appetit alumni cookbooks that I have, Carla is not one of them. I don't have any of her cookbooks. I'm sorry to say. But yeah, it's mostly because the vegetarian recipes don't appeal to me too much. And when we were cooking a lot of Bon Appetit recipes, when we were covering the YouTube channel, I didn't tend to make her recipes.
Yeah, I do have her cookbook, and I don't think I've made anything from it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I want to try and find something to make, though. I feel bad.
Her very, I think, easy looking recipe, which is just broccolini or maybe broccoli and cheese in a skillet. That's pretty much it. I don't know if you can even really call it a recipe, but I'm like, yeah, it's broccoli and cheese. How could that be bad?
But
so
also
I feel like I would try that.
That's what I feel like sometimes her, and not this one, because this one that she did is a meal, but I feel like a lot of her vegetarian recipes, I'm like, it's not a complete dinner.
Right.
But this one had silken tofu, which I never eat because usually you just, I don't know, eat it raw-ish.
Yeah, just pour some soy sauce over it. And
yeah. This is basically what she did, so I'm like, I don't know.
Justine watched it, so you don't have to.
If it feels like something you'd be into, go for it. But if you're like me, being like, a tofu recipe, oh, that's
yeah. Well, that's too bad.
What you got?
What I wanted to talk about today was Stanley Tucci searching for Italy, but I'm not.
Why?
Because you can only watch it on CNN or Hulu Plus. And I thought to myself, well, I have Hulu, but apparently standard Hulu is not enough. You have to have Hulu Plus. So boo to that. Maybe I will find a way to watch Stanley Tucci somehow, someday, but today was not that day. So instead, I'm going to recommend an oldie but a goodie. It is a YouTube series called Feast of Fiction. On this YouTube channel, they cook fantastical fictional recipes from books, movies, comics, and video games. Think things like green eggs and ham, Krabby Patties, Scooby Snacks. You get the idea. And if you're thinking to yourself, isn't this what Babish does? The answer is yes. This is what Babish does. So I'm not sure who did it first, but if you're a fan of Babish and binging with Babish, this is very much in the same vein. You would probably enjoy this as well. There are two hosts on the show, Jimmy Wong. He is an actor. I think one of his biggest credits was that he was in the live-action Mulan movie. He's kind of the nerd half of the show. And then the other co-host is Ashley Adams, and she is the culinary expert. But they're both nerds and they're both cooks, They play to each other's strengths, however. They're both fun. They're friendly. They came out with a cookbook based on their YouTube channel. And I mentioned this as an oldie but a goodie also because they haven't uploaded a new episode for over a year. I'm not really sure what's going on with that. They might be defunct. I can't say for sure. But I enjoy this. It's fun. I certainly haven't watched every episode. It's one of those YouTube channels where I pick and choose depending on whether I've seen the franchise that they are talking about. Their Miyazaki videos are really fun. If you're like me and everyone else who watches a Miyazaki movie and thinks how delicious the animated food looks, this is your chance to actually make it in real life. So yeah, once again, that's called Feast of Fiction, and you can find it on YouTube.
So I watched Do These Candles Really Smell Like Food from New York Times Cooking, hosted by Priya.
I love this concept. I'm so sad. I started watching this before we recorded, and it's not a long video. I meant to watch it all, but then I got busy making grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch and forgot to watch the rest. But this looks like a really fun video.
During National Grilled Cheese Sandwich Month?
Yes, in honor of the month.
Personally, I think it was like less sciencey and less investigatory than her previous videos.
Mm-hmm.
Is basically Priya walking around smelling a lot of things, and then she brings her coworkers a bunch of candles to smell, and guess what they are, with them getting it like 95% wrong. It was all right.
It's like a little social experiment.
Yeah, it's interesting I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit behind the trend of like, hey, there's all these candles that smell like things, and I'm like, yeah.
From what I did see of the video, it reminds me a lot of wine tasting notes. You can just say something poetic, and it doesn't matter if it's complete BS, it's still an interesting way to describe the aroma or flavor of a thing. I'll be watching the rest of the video.
Good. They did show, so McDonald's released like a candle set of all like their Big Mac ingredients.
The ingredients?
Yeah. So one candle is like the sesame seed bun, one candle is the patty, one candle is pickle, like that. I'm pretty sure.
So you could just get a beef scented candle.
I think so. Because Sophia recently, it was either on her socials, but I don't think she made a whole video, where she combined, Sophia Nygaard likes to combine things and melt them all together. So she was also gifted this candle set and combined them to see if it made a Big Mac candle.
Oh, gross.
I don't remember the results, but it made me think of that. So which is why I also kind of thought it was a little not on trend. But what can you do?
So it's something that How to Cook That would have on their channel, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, that's everything that we wanted to cover today in this episode. For all the pictures, and believe me, we take pictures of everything that we make, so you gotta go check them out. And we have the recipes, so you can make them too if you want to. But it's all on our Substack.
It sure is. podappetit.substack.com.
You can subscribe. You can leave us comments. You can leave us notes. You can leave us love letters. Like, Substack is really interactable place where we are at. So
sometimes we have polls. We're there to interact with you.
Join us. And like I said, I follow Carla and Sola and like all these other chefs, and it's like, it's the place to be now, I think.
Great place for food content.
Yeah. Forget Twitter. Twitter's dead to you.
Join us on Substack.
Substack is where it's at. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at pod_appetit. There's a new podcast feature that YouTube rolls out, so make sure you interact with that so we look good in the podcast space that now exists there.
We're trying to be with the times.
Yes. Speaking of being on trend. It us.
It us.
Well, thank you for indulging me, Meg, in my chaos. Making too much food.
If Justine were a D&D character, she'd be chaotic good.
Yes. And then, yeah, we'll catch everybody next time in our May kickoff/check-in. We're going to be in May. Yep. Join us then.
See you in May. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Go to podappetitpodcast.com for all our episodes and links to everywhere you can find us online.
Also, be sure to subscribe to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes on your favorite podcatcher.